All right, so this is a basic sketch of a raven, and when you're doing a basic sketch or a drawing of any sort, you always want to think about very simple shapes. The more complex the shape, you want to break it down into simple, very easy to identify kind of pieces. And so you can see here I just kind of roughed out the basic line work of this raven. I'm putting the legs and stuff like that in there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm using simply one brush. Actually, I think it's the same brush to pretty much paint the same thing. Now, when I'm doing this, I'm making little corrections here and there to kind of adjust it. And so you see I'm like adjusting the beak, I'm adjusting feathers, things like that. Now, when I'm painting, especially speed painting, just to figure out how things work, the first thing I do is put a little background color or something in there just to give it a little tone underneath. And you can see at first when I'm digitally painting, I'm putting in mainly the darks, and I'm picking colors with my color picker, by hand. Like, I'm not trying to create something from a value structure. Like, I'm not color picking from the photo. I'm just throwing in basic colors. And if I see a little blue, I'm going to add a little bit more blue in there. If I see a little bit of red, I'm going to add a little bit more red. Same things with the browns and stuff like that. So especially when you're sketching, you don't want to get in the habit of using a color picker. You want to instead get in the habit of choosing your own colors. Now, for me, when I started plein air painting, that was a big thing about, really pushing your colors. Like, I was always trying to get that color perfectly right. And once I started plein air painting, I started understanding that the eye sees more than any photograph does. And so some of the stuff, it's okay to exaggerate your color. Now, you can see with some really quickly tones, you can see my base layer of, the browns, the blues, the black, and a little bit of the yellow. And ultimately, my bird is pretty much there, right? And so at this point, what I'm doing is I'm adding in more detail and more design in my picture, right? So I'm not worried about going in and doing the basics, right? This is a 15-minute sketch. I'm worried more about going in and getting the details that really push this. And so you can see here, a lot of it is just quick sketching, quick roughing things in, and just kind of pushing to get a little bit more of the detail in there. The rock, because it's unimportant, I'm not really worried about detail or anything like that. I just put in my rough colors. And you can see I'm basically putting in just some kind of shapes. I'm roughing out things. And then that's when I'm going in and sketching in more of the details. Like, so here's where the feathers come in, and I'm adding in that texture now on top of the base color. And I'm pushing that as I get further and further into this. And so that's really one of the big things that you have to worry about, is that it's not so much about what your kind of, every brush you're using or anything like that. It's about what you see and kind of how to make that work when you're sketching. Again, this is 15 minutes. So doing this in 15 minutes is about, putting in details and deciding what you're doing and why you're doing it. And I think this type of sketching works really well, especially for, design and detail. Is it gives you that rough idea of like, this is how to make this. Now, I can always go back in and play and polish and add more details and things like that. But if I can do this in 15 minutes, I can do this in an hour, I can do it in 2 hours. And so, doing a sketch like this is one of the things that, really comes in handy, especially when I'm concepting or, pushing ideas. Plus, it's building my mental library, and which allows me to ultimately, pull from my head more often than just, having to look things up and making things look right. So that's one of the things that definitely needs to be you know, filled with sketches of real life, of different things, bugs and other details, so that you can kind of pull from your head a little bit more often. And so that's basically, like I said, a 15-minute sketch. It's pretty simple. And you can see, like I said, I sped this up a little bit, but it's not that much. So I really recommend that everyone starts, you know, doing a little bit more sketching and kind of showing your work off. Again, this is something that you can do without spending a ton of time, and it's no mess, no cleanup, just go for it. So I hope you enjoy, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask.